Hi guys, in today's video I'm going to show you how I made the Christmasaurus cake. You'll notice the words don't match with my mouth at all, so I'm doing a bit of a voiceover. So this was one we did in a Facebook Live and I've tried to shorten it a bit for you, so I'm just voicing it over the top. So I used my Christmasaurus book, which is written by the incredibly talented Tom Fletcher and also illustrated by the equally talented Devries. You might have seen I did bigger versions of these, which I took to the Cake International show, of 3 of the characters, and what I'll do is I'll put a link in the top corner of the video to that as well. But I wanted to do a smaller version so that you guys at home could have a go at making it yourselves. I'm going to make this on a rectangular board. It's 12 by about 16, but you can do whatever size you want, guys. I've also used a 5-inch cake and a 7-inch cake. So you don't need to level these at the top because we're carving them to a shape. So I'm just going to divide this one in half and just fill it with some buttercream. And guys, if you do want to watch the full-length version of this video, it's still available to watch over on my Facebook page, and it's in the live section of my Facebook page. So I've already filled the middle of the larger one, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a bit off, so it's not quite in half. I've cut it slightly to one side, maybe like a third of the way across, and let's do the same on the smaller cake as well. And we're going to stick these to our cake board. So we're going to start with the larger one and we're going to stand it up on its side on that flat edge that we've just cut. So that's the larger piece of it, not the smaller piece. And then we're going to do the same with the smaller cake. And we're just going to line that in front. So the smaller one's going to be its head and that larger one is going to be like its body. And I'm going to use the offcuts. So that other bit that we cut off, I'm going to pull that in half. I'm going to stick it on each side like so. Just to bring it out, make it a little bit wider. I've used the sticky toffee pudding flavour icing sugar in the middle to make my buttercream. So it's just icing sugar and butter that I've put in this. You don't have to use the flavoured stuff if you don't want that, guys. Again, I'm going to use the offcut from the smaller cake as well to just widen the face a bit. It wasn't quite tall enough, so we just added a bit in there. So it's a fairly basic shape at this point. And we're going to carve it now. I'm going to cut a little bit off this top section here. And you might notice my cake looks quite firm. I did have it in the freezer for a while. It's not fully frozen, but it's not fully defrosted at this point. It just made it a little bit firmer for me when carving it. And we're just going to carve now sort of this outer edge. I'm kind of curving it. I want these to be like the tops of the dinosaur's legs or the Christmasaurus's legs. And again, use any offcuts you've got then to kind of put around this bit here to create the tail, which I want to come from like around the bum and around the side. And I've gone with a laying down position on this one because I thought it was an easier one to do, especially in a Facebook Live. It meant I didn't need any kind of internal structure. Whereas if I'd done him standing up, I would need to create all kinds of internal structure, a bit like I did on the giant size one. Again, the giant size one's not actually cake, but I'll put a link in the corner so you can see that one being made. So let's shape the face. So we're going to angle it so it's a little bit thinner at the front end than the back end. And we'll take a little bit off the front so it slopes downwards as well. Now keep hold of all your offcuts. You can eat some, but you might also want to use them to fill in sort of snow mounds on the board. So I'm just going to cut out a little bit of each side of the head, which is where the eye area is going to go. I think it just needs bulking out a little bit more on the bum, so I'm going to add a bit more cake. So I've kept all those offcuts. We'll just fill it in at the back a bit there. And then I'm going to smooth over it with a layer of buttercream. If you want to use chocolate ganache, you can use chocolate ganache instead. Because this one's laying down, it doesn't need to set overly firm, so buttercream was fine for this one. So once you've covered the whole thing, you're going to scrape it to make it a little bit smoother. You can use a flexible smoother, so I've got a flexible one. I think these are the Innovative Sugarworks ones that I'm using. But you can bend it as you're scraping over something that's kind of curved. So for this one, I'm going to use the Saracino Ready to Roll icing, and it's like, I can't remember if it's pale blue or baby blue. I'll try and put links below the video to everything I've used, guys, for you as well. But we're going to use this for the front arms, so I'm just going to roll little shapes. They want to be quite small, just at the front here. Now, because they're small, I didn't bother putting cake inside the front arms. You can if you want, but it's such a small piece that it didn't seem worth cutting cake to that shape. Now, I've only put 1 layer of buttercream on because it was done in a Facebook Live, so I was limited time-wise. But again, if you wanted to put more than 1 layer on, you want to let your first layer set, firm up, and put a second layer on where you can get it really nice and smooth, then you absolutely can do that. Now, I'm using the same colour blue, and we're going to roll it out large enough to cover the whole cake. And then we're just going to gently press around everywhere. Just trying to push it into all the gaps, sort of between the leg and arms. Just trying to pull out any creases as we go along. You can use a modeling tool to press deeper around those edges. Sometimes if I don't press in really deep, when I cut off any excess, I find I cut away too much and it ends up kind of coming halfway up the cake instead of to the board. So just using a tool helps a little bit. And we're going to use that tool as well to put in little crease lines. So I want to try and put a line in so it looks like kind of the top of the dinosaur's back leg, and some creases in for where the tail is. I'm going to press a little bit at the back down the back of the neck, around the leg. I've put little creases in on the front leg as well, or the arm, and we'll try and cut off any extra. Now, just before it has too much time to sort of firm up, I'm just going to put the eye socket in as well. So I've still got to cut some more fondant off from around the board, but to get the eye socket in before I forget. Now his head looks a bit of an odd shape at the back, but we're covering that. Because of his kind of icicle mane design, I wanted to make it a funny shape so that we have less of the mane to add on later. Hopefully it'll make sense later. So we're just going to do the same at this side, pressing in. So I'm just pushing in a bit to create like that back leg. So I'm just going to press in some little nostrils, just near the front. Not too big. And I do have the book, the Christmasaurus book, nearby as well, so that I can keep looking at the dinosaur to get a rough idea of what it looks like. And then we're gonna texture it with a texture mat. And you can use all different kinds of texture mats. You could even use like a pebble imprint one to give you a nice dinosaur texture. It doesn't show very well on camera, guys, so I apologize. I think it's the dragon skin one that I'm using, the K2 one. Again, I'll put links below, but it doesn't show very well on camera. And you can also just use round plunger cutters as well to just press in, or any kind of circle cutter to just push in to make an imprint, or even something like a straw would work well for this as well. Just going to push a little bit deeper around the back of the head where the neck parts are going to go. So the Christmasaurus kind of has these details above his eye. I'm not really sure what you call it, but I've sort of created a semicircle-ish shape to start with, and then we're just pressing in with a Dresden tool to kind of change the shape a little bit. And I'm pinching and pulling it around, and we're going to stick that up near the top of the eye socket. Now, if you prefer to use modelling chocolate for this works really well with modelling chocolate. Let's just put in some little lines. They almost look more like leaves when I put lines in. You're going to do the same on the other eye, and then what we're going to do is we're going to just brush on a bit of colour. So you want a blue colour powder. And these are the edible dusts that I'm using, guys. And what I'll do is I'll link below to the ones that I've used. I've got a fairly bright blue. And I'm just using large fluffy brushes to dust the colour on. And I'm keeping the brushes dry for this one. You might even want to add a small amount of like a dark purple dust as well. And we don't want to put it on evenly. We want it to be darker down the centre of the body and sort of the top of the head. You can even use some lusters. So this is a sparkling white one that I'm just dusting on. It gives it a bit of a shine, a bit of a sheen. Again, it doesn't show overly well on camera, but in person it looks quite nice. And if you find it's not sticking when it's dry, you can always dilute it to make a paint. So you're going to mix it to a paint. You can also flick it on as well. So if you want like little dots everywhere, we can flick that on. And don't worry about the fact that the board is a little bit messy, because we're going to cover that in a bit of a snow scene as well later. Okay, so we're going to fill in the eyes. Now, I want him to have closed eyes. With him being laying down, I thought we can make him asleep. So we've just put a ball of the same colour blue in the eye socket. And then let's just cut out some little snowflakes for later. So I'm just using some plunger cutters. Again, I'll put links below, guys, to what I've used. You can also, if you don't want to cut out the shapes, you can buy sprinkles that are already the right shape for you. So I'm just cutting these out now, so they've got a little bit of time to firm up for later. And I just wanted to show you that if you use the same texture mat that we used for the Christmasaurus' skin, if you use it on some white, it makes quite a nice kind of snow-like pattern and texture. And what I'm going to do is use some of those cake-off cuts on the board. And I'm not too worried about the exact shapes of them. These are going to look like mounds of snow once they're covered. Now, my buttercream at this point was getting a little bit firm because it was quite cold in the room. So you'll see it's very difficult for me to spread it. So yeah, if you guys are doing this at home, make sure your buttercream has not hardened. But in the Facebook Live, it was difficult for me to heat it up. You can also, if you don't want to use cake, guys, you can use your extra bits of fondant instead, just to create little lumps and bumps on the board. But by using cake, that's a good way to make sure more of it is edible. I mean, the fondant's edible, but people don't like to eat huge amounts of fondant. It just really depends on if you've already eaten your cake offcuts or not. And then we're going to cover it in that white fondant. So don't worry about getting a piece that's big enough to cover the whole board. We can do it in pieces. And you might find that some areas are a little bit trickier to cover than others. So I'm going to have to kind of fold it up a little bit to get it into some of the creases and cracks between like the leg and the tail. Just going to press it together where it sort of meets with the last piece. Just give it a good press down with your finger. And of course we can texture back over that with a texture mat. So you're just going to do that all over. Trim off any extra from around the edge of the board. You might even want to add some snowballs in there. So if you just roll some balls of fondant, you could even, you know, if you've made some chocolate truffles and you've coated them white, they'd probably look quite nice as snowballs as well. And then let's just add some of those snowflakes that we cut out earlier. Now I'm going to give the dinosaur some little feet. I know he actually has quite big feet, but I think we've only got space for small feet in here. It's easier to do this after I'd iced the board white. So it's just a piece of the blue fondant that we've just cut in half. And we're just squeezing that under sort of the hip section of the dinosaur. Get a tiny bit of the blue dust on as well. And I think I'm going to use this colour, the blue paste for this. Now, instead of kneading it, if you can cut it off in chunks and just cut it to the shapes you want, it's going to be a little bit easier because it's going to stay firmer once we knead it. Like if we knead it nice and soft, it's going to be harder to cut the shapes to look more like the pieces of the Christmasaurus, like the spines and the pieces that go around the neck, and we want them to have like nice sharp lines. And I'm going to start pressing these around the neck area. And then you also want some that are going to go up the body, sort of like scales. And I'm just attached these with a small amount of water, or you can use piping gel or even edible glue. And he has 2 rows of these that go up. In fact, no, I think he actually has 3 rows even. Make sure they're smaller as they come down the tail, slightly bigger on the top. Now, I haven't done them so big that they don't hold on themselves. If you go really big, you'll probably find you have to put a cocktail stick or something in there to hold them in place. And then for the eye, I'm going to roll a small thin piece of black that we're going to just put over that sort of blue eyeball. Because remember, we're keeping this one with eyes closed. It's kind of arched upwards a bit, that black piece that I've put on. And then we want some little teardrop shaped black pieces for the toenails. Just see if you can hook them over at the point a little bit. I'm just going to stick those on the front of his foot. And we'll do the same on the back. Ooh, it's a little bit untidy on the back one. I don't think I did this very neat. So in the Facebook Lives, guys, I don't have a huge amount of time, so we always do things a little bit quicker than we would do normally. So if you're doing this in your own time, don't rush it. I think this one took me about 2 hours to do in the Facebook Live, but you can obviously spend a little bit longer to get nicer results. So I'm just adding a tiny bit of pink edible powder to his cheeks. This is a petal palette, this one, so they are edible powders. I know it looks like makeup, it's not. Again, I'll put links below. But we do sell most of these products on my website anyway. And that sparkly white one that we used earlier, I'm just dusting a bit of this all over the whiteboard so the snow effect looks a bit more sparkly. And I still do need to finish the mane and the spikes. So this is the bit that was a little bit repetitive. Obviously, the more of these pieces you put on, the longer it's going to take you. So you might want to cut wider pieces that take up more space so that you don't have to do as many. You can even add different coloured dots as well. I thought it might be quite nice with some blue dots. I'm just using an edible pen for this. This is my Fractal edible pen. Just drawing some, almost like freckles on the cheeks and the tops of the arms and legs. And then, of course, finishing the icicle mane that he's got on the other side as well. So the little blue bits were the most time-consuming bit of this, I would say. But the nice thing was I didn't have to worry about them all being the same size and shape. So I'm really pleased that I had the chance to make a Christmasaurus cake, as I do really enjoy the Christmasaurus books. And I'm just so pleased that I was allowed to create giant-sized ones of these for the Cake International show. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this smaller version of the cake, and I'd love to see if you guys have a go at making them yourself. Just going to finish it off quickly with a ribbon. I'm just going to stick it on with some double-sided tape as well, just to finish it off and neaten it nicely. So I'd like to say a really big thank you as well to everybody that does join me for the Facebook Lives. I haven't done one for a little while, guys. But yeah, thank you to everybody that does join me for those live videos. yeah, a really big thank you to Puffin Books for allowing me to recreate the characters from the books for the cake show, and also a really big thank you to Tom Fletcher for writing such incredible books, and to Shane Devries who drew the characters for the books. So thank you very much, guys. I'd love to see what you create for them. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button and leave me a comment below. You can see more of my tutorials by clicking on the images on screen now. If you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button to stay up to date with my future tutorials. There are also links in the description box below where you can find me on Facebook, Instagram and more.